Hello and welcome to this video. And today we're going to talk about genuine Friday piece of musical British history. It's today, 22nd of July, 60 years ago, that the John Mayall, Eric Clapton Blues Breakers album came out. The album where Eric Clapton effectively invented rock lead guitar, the sound of a Gibson turned up fully, wailing for a Marshall amp. This album was made May 1966 in the Deck Studios in London. It's produced by the British blues producer Mike Vernon, who would go on to do work with Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, bands like that afterwards. There's really, it's, as I said, it's striking for Clapton's work on this record, and the fact that sort of dispensed with his young confidence, being 21 at the time, with a conventional way of recording guitar in the studio. We've got the engineers actually to place the mics further away to pick up sort of the room ambience and turn the guitar right up. And effectively, the band played like they would in a club. Hither to this, guitars had always been recorded. Lead guitar and records have been recorded in a lot lower volumes, so any problems with overload or feedback, etc. So even like the absolute masters, the Black American blues masters like Buddy Guy, their earlier records, the guitar tone is relatively thin to what came later on. But Clapton broke down this boundary in one go in '66 with his playing on Blues Breakers album, and this replication really of Chicago blues as it filtered through these British players' own individuality. And though that's a point that's really worth making, though Clapton obviously took a lot of his, or majority of his playing, from people like Freddie King, Otis Rush, and Buddy Guy, and B.B. King, etc. He does, even at this relatively early stage, diffuse it with his own individuality, his own sense of phrasing. This is near the edge, sort of angry, sometimes very fiery playing that never quite tips over into anything atonal. He's sort of a master of that sort of control, and continues to be as well. And that record is obviously notable just for that. It's really the second wave of the British blues boom. Begins with the Stones and the like far more R&B Chicago, to this more onus onto individual sort of virtuosity. Now that's not to say that John Mayall is not without his place, and even the albums, it should be completely overshadowed by his Clapton's contributions. John Mayall had been around for some time, he's considerably older than the rest of the group. I think he's 33 by the time Clapton joined the Blues Breaks and made this record. So he's a bit more of an old master of it. He comes down from Manchester, I think, from the north to London, and records an album live at Kloot's Cleek, which was a club in London my mother used to frequent to see Mayall and Clapton back in 1965, and places like the Manor House and Islington, all those areas where that was the circuit of the time. Mayall was interesting thing for someone who was playing Chicago blues. Obviously, he had the very sort of British and reedy voice, but he made it his own. He was adept at the organ and at the harmonica as well, and incredible knowledge and stuff. So much so, when Clapton left the Yardbirds, he stayed with Mayall for quite a while in a small room. This is in his autobiography. He talks of this, and went from Mayall's unbelievable collection of blues and really sort of did his homework there, and honed his style ready for this record. And some incredible performances around at the time, very few of which has survived. There's some bootlegs and various compilations, low quality but recording, high quality playing, like covers of them doing Freddie King's "Have You Ever Loved a Woman," which is an incredibly confident and fiery playing by Clapton on that record as well. And just with this, you see him, this is in terms of his career, being at his most blues purist. But there's the other members of the band find it interesting as well. We've got John McVie, who would obviously go off to form Fleetwood Mac shortly afterwards, as a really solid, great blues bass player. Really provides a great like foundations in this record. And you see Huey Flynn, drummer, who later formed Beginners Flynn. It's a great blues drumming style. That stuff's all over this, and there's interesting covers on there. Otis Rush's All Your Love. There's Freddie King's Hideaway, with Clapton's articulation on it is just incredible to follow over to this day. Some of the touches and runs that he makes on that record, and sort of goes beyond Freddie King's original into some other area, really, like that. And out tracks like Double Crossing Time, the slow blues on there, Have You Heard? A fantastic done, as is Stepping Out, which Cream would like take later and extemporize on. But in the short, sort of the concise version here, when it's Clapton's guitar just plays, it just would lay the blueprints, as I said, from players that really came afterward this for many years. So as I said, in terms of his work, this was sort of the peak of his purity phase. He would then go into Cream, thinking it was going to be more of a blues trio along with Buddy Guy's line, but obviously those guys have other ideas. When If the Moors All Life had sort of rooted in the blues, but jazzier improvisational direction, and inspired everything that they would afterwards. And then he moved to Blind Faith, Delaney and Bonnie, and then Derek and the Dominoes, and his solo career after that. But at the heart of this, there is still always the blues in there. Kind of later on, after the 80s and Live Aid, and sort of relaunching himself and sort of regaining sort of his commercial value in the late 80s, and made some really, quite commercial records. He returns to blues in the 1990s, but prior to this, a couple of gigs he did in 1990 and 91 at the Royal Albert Hall, where 1990 he asked Robert Cray and Buddy Guy, and 91 asked them back, and Albert Collins as well. And it's a series, they do their own sets and all collaborate together. And there's a lot of blues covers on there. All Your Love from the Mayall album he plays at this gig, and this really sort of reawakens something in terms of Clapton. So by the Unplugged album, he records these Robert Johnson, some Robert Johnson songs, Malted Milk, etc., and Walking Blues acoustically. And I think after the death of his son, this in 91, this really gives him an impetus to put together the next project, and leads up to From the Cradle. And then in 93, I saw him at the Albert Hall, and he did something fairly radical, as he didn't play any of his hits at all, and presented a lot of blues covers from acoustic music, going up through the regions, some Memphis blues, stuff from different areas, and then full into Chicago stuff, Muddy Waters, and then leading up to the single string sort of players. Buddy Guy covers things like 5 Long Years, whatever, and this was pretty radical, and he was playing absolutely at the top of his game then. That continued with the From the Cradle album and the 95 tour. So it was there, and it sort of return to where he'd left off with John Mayall at this time, so nearly 30 years later, was absolutely fascinating. So some of the detractors that don't like Clapton will cite some of the more commercial hits, the easy stuff to sort of drum, often forget that the heart of this is the blues guitar work is incendiary and articulate, and and as I said, his very own. And it starts with the Mayall, with the Blues Breakers album, which still stands up to this day. It sounds great. There's fire in it. It's got a Chicago type feel. It's a sort of London Soho feel in there as well. It's all there. It's very 1966, and it's right in the middle of it all. This is the summer of this declared swing in London, and that you'd had the Time magazine that talked about that as well, and the Beatles are up in their creativity, and the Stones are writing all of their own songs, and there's amongst absolutely all of this going on, you then have this sort of instrumental virtuosity of Clapton with the Blues Breakers thrown right into the mix, and that, you know, as I said, it's an absolutely pivotal album for the British blues movement and British blues music history. Is, you know, the plaudits it's garnered after that are absolutely, you know, absolutely deserved. It's a great record, you know, and sometimes I think it's been said, and perhaps have made nothing after 1966, he still would have been remembered. This sort of, this changes everything. And so it, you know, the great thing with YouTube, with the internet these days, with digital streaming, you know, whatever, this is easy findable. So go and chuck it on. You won't put yourself back to the summer of '66, and you won't regret it. So happy birthday, Blues Breakers, a record that I've known for a very long time. And so hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll be back with more very, very soon. Thank you very much. Speak to you later. Bye bye.